Then welcome to the October meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Cheryl Gannon. I'm the president of the Civic Federation. I want to welcome everyone who's attending tonight. The first order of business is to approve the agenda for this meeting. The agenda was published in the October newsletter on page 2. I do have one small change, though. When we get to the announcements part of the meeting, I will recognize Rich Madaleno, the county's chief administrative officer, to provide us information on question A on the ballot to limit the terms of the county executive. The ballot question has not received enough public education or explanation, in my view. I'm grateful that he's able to come tonight and bring us up to speed. And now I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Motion to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. The motion is adopted. The next order of business is adopting the minutes of the September meeting. They were published on pages 11 to 12 of the October newsletter. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes of the September meeting?
Motion to adopt.
A second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The minutes are adopted. Next is the treasurer's report. Jerry Garson is our treasurer. Please go ahead, Jerry.
We operate on a fiscal year from July 1 through next June 30th. So far, we've collected $1,050 of dues. We've had expenses of $627, made up of $328 for websites, $300 for memberships, giving us a net income for the period of $422. Our bank balance as of today is $6,638.
Any questions for Jerry? Thank you, Jerry. We're now at the announcement part of the meeting. I'd like to start by recognizing Rich Madaleno, Montgomery County's Chief Administrative Officer. He will bring us up to speed on question A. It's a significant issue of governance, how and when we conduct elections. I'm grateful that he's here to fill us in, and the floor is now yours, Rich.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. It's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to first start by thanking everyone for giving me this opportunity and reaching out to the executive's office to hear a little bit about question A. Just briefly, for voters in Montgomery County, there are two ballot questions that will be before us this year. Question 1, a state question adding a constitutional amendment about reproductive rights. And then question A, a county-only change to the charter, which would reduce the number of terms consecutive terms a county executive can serve from the current 3 to 2. Those are the two ballot questions that are before us. It takes a simple majority of those casting a vote to pass the charter amendment. So not of those voting on the charter amendment. So it's not a majority of those voting. So if there's drop off, it's just a majority of those voting on the two questions. Question A was petition to referendum by supporters of the question. It was not added by the county council. As a reminder, just in 2016, the voters adopted term limits for the first time for the county, adding a provision for 3 terms for the county council, 3 terms for the county executive. So that obviously was during the middle of the 3rd term for County Executive Leggett, who had already expressed that he was not running for re-election. So the wording of this question that's before the voters this year specifies that it would apply to the person in office currently. So it would change the term limit for County Executive Elrich, thus depriving him and the voters an opportunity to be renominated and reelected in 2026. And it would obviously diverged the term limits from the council and the executive, leaving the council at 3 terms, the executive at 2 terms. Obviously, the executive is concerned about this, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what that would mean in our structure. And some of you have been around the county government for a very long time. Just to give you a tad bit of history, and Cheryl, please give me the time whenever you want me to stop and go to questions. But very briefly, the elected executive was created in 1968, was approved by the voters in 1968. The charter itself was approved by the voters 20 years earlier. For those first 2 decades, we had a county council who selected the county executive as an administrative position, the more or less the position I have now. In 1968, the decision was made to have an elected executive. Interestingly, unlike what you might be most familiar with at the federal or state level or in other jurisdictions where the executive branch and legislative branches were created at the same time, in this case, the legislative branch created the executive branch 20 years later and gave only certain powers to the executive. So we have a weak executive style of government on purpose. And the result of that, if you were to just limit the executive, any executive, to 2 terms, would be to, in my humble opinion, so hamstrung an executive to make it almost impossible to get things done. Already, with a strong budget with the council, the council can add money whenever they want during the fiscal year, very much unlike at the state or other counties. The county council must approve all appointed positions. There are a limited number of positions, 47 right now. There are only 3 positions, the special assistants to the county executive, that are not subject to council confirmation and are not merit system employees. So an executive only has 3 people they can hire and fire like that. Everyone else is either a merit system employee or goes through the council. I'll contrast that with Howard County, that has a 2-term limit for county executive. Only their chief administrative officer and their county attorney are approved by the county council. All the rest of the executives in the county are just hired by the county executive, fired by the county executive. They're non-merit positions. So that is the model that's consistent across the state and the other large counties in the state. By the time you would get an administration put together, go through the council confirmation process, you're talking about easily 1 year, if not longer, into the term. Because remember, the council is an executive are sworn in early December. They have one meeting, and then they don't have another council meeting into the middle of January. Then you got to put together an administration, your budget. It just is so long and cumbersome under our current rules that by the time you have an administration put together, you're already into literally the 3rd year of your first term. And then should you have the chance to be renominated and reelected, you're already a lame duck.
Yeah.
I think in the end, it would be so debilitating to the executive branch that truly, without other substantial reforms in our county charter, it would make the executive branch, I think, unresponsive at all to the elected executive, and I think destabilizing for the organization. I personally think it's unfair to the current executive to change the rules in the middle of his time in office. If people don't want him as county executive, then they can always nominate or elect in the general election someone else. Clearly, in all of these in the general election, when it's before the total voters of the county, he has won substantial races, including exceeding 70% of the vote in 2022. So it does seem as if this is an effort to cut his time in office artificially short, because the person who did organize this run is the person he defeated by a more than 2-to-1 margin in 2022. So I'll gladly stop there. I'll answer any of the questions that you might have about this. But again, we would, on behalf of the county executive who could not be here tonight, ask for you to vote against this question A, because the question, just to be clear, that the wording on the ballot will say, are you for or against this initiative?
Okay. Peggy Dennis, you have your hand up. Go ahead. You're muted, Peggy.
What? Peggy, you can't mute Peggy Dennis.
She's unmuted. We still can't hear you, Peggy. Let me see if I can help. Okay, you have to do it yourself, I think. Let me see, I can ask you to unmute. Peggy, you're still muted. Wait.
Well, you went off and then back on. Oh,
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, could you come back after Rich has finished? I have points to make about the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Paula.
I was expecting a really good question from
I'm sorry, Rich.
Paula, go ahead.
my
Sure,
fee is the
hi.
same, whether Peggy asked me a question or not.
Yeah.
She'll ask, you know that. So thanks, Rich, for the discussion. Really, the Civic Fed is a nonpartisan organization, and it's not supposed to be Democratic or Republican or support one or the other. So I'll say this in support of the question and ask people that I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea to vote for the term limits. The governor of Virginia, as we know, only has one term, 6 years. Our governor has 2 terms. The president only has 2 terms. So most offices are 6 or 8 years, which should be plenty to get an agenda through. And just because there have been a lot of, it's an election year, things have been flying around. From what I understand, most of the people that signed that huge petition were Democrats. And I think voters do have a right to limit the amount of time their elected officials have in office. And don't forget, I don't know if this is statewide or just countywide, but we don't have the right to recall. So we don't really have any rights once someone is placed into office. So, and I know you can say, well, the council can recall, but we know that's in real life, that won't happen. So I would just ask people to, notwithstanding, Rich, all the information you provided, to really think about what this means for the future of the county, how much the county is changing, and how an elected official with the power of the county executive overseeing all the agencies in the county and the huge budget should be able to accomplish in an 8-year period should they be reelected. So thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Paula. I think
So if I may, I think it is important to compare and contrast. Yes, clearly the governor of Maryland, the president, has a 2-term limit. For many of you know, I served in the state senate, so I had to confirm appointments of the governor. Interestingly, county law forbids a county executive from selecting someone to lead a department on an acting basis who is outside of the county. So whereas the governor can select, for example, someone to be the secretary of the Department of Human Services and appoint that person in an acting role until the General Assembly has the opportunity, the Senate has the opportunity to interview and confirm, we can't do that. So if you're recruiting someone from outside of the county government, you can't bring that person on until they go through the whole confirmation process, which one might think would be quick, but because the council rules and their approach, it takes weeks, if not months, to get someone appointed. So I would just contrast that with the authorities that both our president and our governor have with filling out an administration, which the county laws and interpretation of our charter do not provide. And so that's why without other substantial changes, and maybe people will want to move forward with them when they see that they have put their county government in such, the executive branch of the county government in such poor condition, they will want to make these changes, because otherwise, the way we have things set up, the 2 terms are going to be disabling of an effective executive branch, in my humble opinion, no matter which party occupies the seat.
Okay, John Holden, you're next.
Great, thank you. This comment is not based on any kind of partisan feelings about the current county executive, but I think that a 3-term limit is probably the right balance of making sure that elected officials do not use the power of incumbency to stay in office forever, but can also be in office long enough with the support of voters every 4 years to learn what is a fairly complicated job as described by Rich. And in my opinion, independent of what you think of the current county executive, we should not change our current county charter just because one group of residents, I think, does have an issue with one current county executive. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Carrie Lamari.
Hey, Rich.
Amar, where is the thing?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Carrie.
Okay. The way I see it is this.
No, I'll do it.
Who's talking?
Oh, I looked at it. I looked there, didn't see it. Okay, do you want me to get it?
May I speak or should I wait
Carrie,
for this?
Sorry, the reason I have this is I have a work
John,
room that I don't have
John,
to be
you
on
need to go
camera,
on
but I'm
mute.
just listening.
All right.
Anyway, the way I see it is this. Well, my father used to have a saying when it comes to politics. He would say, when they're green, they're ripe, and when they're ripe, they're rotten. And there's some truth to that. We've seen as our elected officials. Now, look, I support a 3-term county executive, but the reason why I support it would be that it would be an imbalance of power between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Every second term, our county executive would be a lame duck. And the fact that we have 3-term county council members, when we look at their campaign contributions, by the 3rd term, they're getting 3 times as much money as they did the first year. So there's this allegiance that starts to build in power to special interest groups. So if we're going to change the county executive to 2-term, we should be changing the county council to 2-term. But the fact of the matter is, that's not what we're looking at this election. We're looking at a targeted attack on one branch of government, and I don't think that that's the right way to go.
Okay, thank
Balance
you.
of power.
Thank you, Carrie. Leanne Tobias.
Carrie has just made the point that I was going to make, that we already have a very strong council in this county. We have a comparatively weak county executive. And for example, the most obvious thing, for example, is the fact that the county executive has almost no say in land use policy, for example. And my view is that if you want to maintain what little parity there is between the executive branch and the legislative branch, you want the terms of of council members and a county executive to be coterminous, and reducing the time served by the county executive to 2 terms while keeping the council at 3 terms just magnifies the imbalance in power that currently exists. So let me just endorse what Carrie said. This is not a good piece of legislation, I don't think. And I personally will be opposing it and encouraging others to oppose it, including small government folks, because I think it's more a matter of parity than it is a matter of controlling elected officials. Thanks a
Okay.
lot.
Thank you, Leanne. I don't see any other hands, so I'm just going to make one small comment here. To me, what really bothered me about this proposal was the retroactivity of it, that we're going to go back and make it retroactive to hold the county executive, whoever was holding office in December of 2023. So they're really singling out Mark Elrich to make him ineligible to run for office again. I think that's really, that kind of maneuver is underhanded, and I think no way to run a county government, run elections. Imagine if we said we're going to limit the county council to 2 terms and make it retroactive to whoever was holding office in 2023, and that which have the effect of dumping several of the members off the council. I think there would be a big hue and cry. I think that underhandedness by itself should be enough for people to say no to it. That's my comment. Peggy, I see your hand is up. Is it still about the minutes?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay, well, we'll get to you then. Anyone else want to say anything on county term limits? We just have another minute or two. Seeing no hands, I will say thank you to Rich for coming. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was very kind of you to ask. And remember, early voting starts on October 24th and runs till October 31st. We have sent out 160,000, well, the Board of Elections has sent out 160,000 ballots already, and nearly 60,000 have already been returned. Tomorrow is the first day of canvassing of the Board of Elections. What's new in state elections this year is in Maryland, absent the mail-in ballots can be certified and put aside for counting before Election Day. It used to be 2 days after Election Day, so that on election night, they will be able to release a count, hopefully a substantial count of the mail-in ballots at the same time that they release the early vote tally, which will be a half an hour after the last polling place in the state closes. So not the last one of the county, but should there be some glitch that happens in Allegheny County and one polling place has to stay open an hour later, it'll be a half an hour until after the last polling place closes in the state. So just to give you a little update as to where we are so far in the election and how the process and the results will look a little different in 2024 than they have in the last few general elections.
Okay, well, thank you again for your time. We'll see you early next year, I hope, for your annual
you.
visit on the county executive's budget.
Yep. What?
Okay.
Have me back on the budget? Me?
Yep, you back on the budget.
Okay.
See you then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. We're now going to go to the first Vice President, Joyce Squads, who I think has a brief announcements about programming.
Oops, let me unmute. I guess I did that. Yep. We have a November meeting on November 14th, which will have some of our legislative representatives. We will have Senator Waldstrecker, Delegate Mark Corman, and Delegate Julie Polakovich-Carr with us to tell us what they've been up to. In December, we're hoping to have someone from the Board of Education, or MCPS. I have invited Dr. Taylor and have not heard back, and we will follow up with that. And that's December 9th. And on December 16th, Jerry Garson has arranged a program with, let's see the name, Ava McIntyre Garvey and a colleague to talk to folks who are interested about the whole assessment and challenging process.
Okay, thank you. Peggy, let's go back and you can raise your question about the minutes. They've been adopted, but what do you want to do?
Yeah, the minutes were so rushed, I didn't have a chance to be called on. The September 9 minutes listed chairs of committees that needed to be filled. It did not include a chair for the legislation committee, which it should. And I had suggested to Cheryl that she try to get two co-chairs, one to watch the legislation at the county level and another co-chair to watch the legislation at the state level. They're two very different entities and they do require a lot of oversight. Also, on the September Executive Committee meeting, it mentions a bylaws committee. I do not recall anybody calling for a bylaws committee to be initiated. When was it called for? Who is on it? And may those of us who wish to serve on it please be added.
Okay, so it was approved to be established at the September 9th meeting. We took a vote on it. It's a special committee. The members were appointed. The bylaws don't call for an approval of specific members. Jerry did tell me that you wanted to serve on it, but they had already met 3 times by then. So we weren't adding anyone to the committee then.
That's very unfortunate.
Okay. All right. Moving on now to our Community Hero Award. Tonight, we're awarding the Montgomery County Civic Federation's Community Hero Award to Janis Sartucci. Ms. Sartucci is well known for her community activism, particularly as a key figure in the Parents Coalition and their watchdog role in calling for transparency and accountability for the Montgomery County public school system. This award recognizes her hard work uncovering and bringing to light the mismanagement of the EV school bus contracts, the embezzlement and the lack of oversight of these multi-million-dollar contracts, which to date cost our county millions in lost education funds. Her efforts exposed improprieties in the bidding process and in the award of a significant electric bus contract by MCPS. The work she has done for years is now coming to fruition, and WJLA reporter Scott Taylor highlighted some of it in a recent news report. For bringing needed attention to the deficiencies of the MCPS procurement process, the MCCF expresses its deep appreciation for the valuable work of Janis Sartucci. We have a certificate to send you, Janis, and if you'd like to make some brief comments, please go ahead now. Janis.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this honor. I've unmuted. MCPS electric school bus contract must be reviewed in light of the adjudicated facts supporting the criminal convictions of the MCPS Department of Transportation directors who were integrally involved in managing the bidding process, evaluating proposals, and awarding the contract. That is from the Appellate Court of Maryland, March 5th, 2024 opinion and order. To date, the Montgomery County Board of Education has refused to comply with this appellate court order. I made that court order public July 18th. Why hasn't the Board of Education complied with the court order? An immediate action item from the Board of Education's report that they contracted for, an audit of the Transportation Department, said, quote, open the solicitation process to multiple electric school bus vendors, end quote. That's from the January 2024 Center for Effective School Operations audit of the MCPS Department of Transportation. To date, the Board of Education has refused to acknowledge the CSO report that they ordered and paid $168,380 for. And the Board of Education, as of last week, announced they would continue to order electric school buses from their original vendor. I made the CSO audit public in August. Why didn't the Board of Education? I want to thank the Civic Federation for this award and for spotlighting a major procurement by MCPS that has put the entire MCPS school bus operation into an unsustainable position, according to their own audit. I'm a fiscally responsible, lifelong Democrat. I grew up in Montgomery County and I'm a graduate of Montgomery Knowles, Eastern, and Blair. I'm also a taxpayer who wants Montgomery County to make smart decisions with our tax dollars. I'm not opposed to electric school buses or any other MCPS procurement. I am opposed to abuse, fraud, and waste of taxpayer dollars because in education, dollars are precious and every available dollar should be spent on teachers, classrooms, and providing a free public school education for our children. I also want to thank my fellow Parents Coalition members whose years of experience and expertise in government contracting and procurement are invaluable in piecing together the limited information made public by MCPS, and for their deep commitment to the principles of our group and to the goal of a free public school education for all children. Their dedication to these goals has kept our advocacy going for over 20 years. We've sought to achieve education goals around curriculum, expectations, remediation, acceleration, options, transparency, accountability, and meaningful community input. But much of our advocacy has centered around following the money, because it is the money that makes all of the other goals attainable. The Parents Coalition investigation into the MCPS electric school bus scheme revealed several basic flaws in the administration of MCPS and its oversight by the Board of Education and the County Council. As taxpayers, we can understand people can make mistakes, but we should expect our government to be organized and disciplined enough to catch mistakes before they cause significant damage, to admit when processes fail, and to fix those processes, to admit when bad decisions are made, and to hold officials accountable for their bad decisions. That is what high-functioning organizations do. Unfortunately, MCPS, the Board of Education, and the County Council have too frequently ignored these taxpayer expectations. MCPS's electric school bus scheme is an example of this. Decades of lax oversight of the MCPS Transportation Department allowed staff members to alter bid evaluation sheets for a $168 million procurement without anyone noticing. Signing a contract that puts ownership of school buses and charging stations in the hands of a shell corporation. If the contract ends or the corporation dissolves, the buses and charging stations stop running immediately and MCPS's transportation collapses. Multiple MCPS administrators claimed that the electric bus scheme was budget neutral without any justification. We now know that claim was a lie. The Board of Education signed a contract that will increase the cost of school buses by 28%. Where will that funding come from? Announcing an all-electric school bus fleet while ignoring the fact that electric school buses could not hold a charge long enough to handle midday special education and half-day runs, and most egregiously, failure to hold any senior MCPS officials accountable for their lack of oversight of this scheme has now placed the MCPS transportation system in an unsustainable position. And that's the opinion of the independent audit. It is said that democracy dies in darkness, but shining a light is just the first step in maintaining democracy. Those that govern our county need to act on what the light reveals, and our county citizens must demand that from them. Thank you again for your acknowledgement of our work, and I'm happy to provide any of the documents I've referenced to you to read. I would love if people would read the audit that the school system paid for. Just read 5 pages of this 100-page document. It's eye-opening, it's a fantastic document, and there's a lot to be learned from it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Janice, and thank you for your work. We appreciate it. Alan's clapping. We could all clap. Well done, Janice, really. Now we're going to move on to our next speaker, Michele Rosenfeld. Many of you heard Michele present at our Attainable Housing September 5th symposium. And since that time, we've had questions and discussion directed to us about the impact of the Virginia court decision on the Arlington, Virginia upzoning. Michelle's a longtime land use attorney here in Montgomery County and the former counsel for the Montgomery County Planning Department. She has reviewed the complaint in that case and the court documents and will now share with us what she's learned so far and what, if any, conclusions we can make. I appreciate her willingness to look into this issue for us and come here again. Thank you, Michele. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you this evening. Tonight, I'm going to give you a brief sort of interim update on where things are in the Virginia case. The court had ruled in an oral ruling from the bench that it was going to overturn some or all of the legislation, the Virginia equivalent of the Attainable Housing Initiative that our council is now considering. I have reviewed the 65-page complaint, and I also have reviewed a nearly 100-page trial brief that was filed. I'm in touch with the lead attorney in that case. There will not be a formal written decision issued until October 25th or thereabouts. The court had announced that it would issue a written decision and, in addition, release the trial transcript the proceedings. So at the moment, we know the arguments that were made by the plaintiffs in the case, but we don't have a real tangible handle on how and why the court ruled as it did. I can tell you, having reviewed from the pleadings, that the arguments were based on violations of Virginia law. They were almost entirely, if not entirely, procedural: failure to notice, failure to conduct required studies, introducing legislation after public hearings were concluded. They all were statutorily based procedural arguments against the case. I also will say that the trial was a 5-day trial. There were 19 witnesses. There'd been a number of depositions. The plaintiffs in that case had really done their homework. There was, at least from the perspective of the allegations and the facts that were put forward by the plaintiffs, some really, really incriminating patterns of behavior in how Arlington County had looked to and worked to get this legislation adopted. So really tonight, my goal is to give you an interim update. After the final decision comes out, I would be happy to return and give you a more robust update into the court's thinking and what the judge actually ruled on. But I know that there was a lot of interest because the outcome of the ruling had been announced, and I just wanted to give everybody a brief update on where things stood. Oops, Cheryl, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted again. Do we have any questions for Michele? You raise your hand. All right, people are quiet tonight.
To be continued.
To be
It's hard to talk about something if you don't really have the facts in front of you. So I suspect there would be a more robust discussion after we have a chance to see what the court actually did.
Okay, I see Leanne put her hand up. Go ahead, Leanne. You are muted.
Hi there, Michele.
Hi, Leanne. How are you tonight?
Yeah. My question is this: just on the procedural arguments made, could you just give us an overview of a little bit more depth on what arguments were made by the plaintiffs?
Sure. Some of the highlights were the fact that there is a standard way in which legislation is supposed to be advertised. It needs to clearly articulate what the basis of the legislation is, what it hopes to achieve. Theirs fell short of that. They didn't really clearly specify what the zone would do, where it would go into effect, and who would be affected. The legislation was introduced after the close of all the public hearings, which is it frankly stuns me that that's the way that occurred. But obviously, there need to be substantive public hearings on legislation after it's introduced. There are certain factors that Virginia state law requires their zoning legislation, certain factors that need to be evaluated and studied and considered. And the record was clear that that did not happen. Those studies did not occur, or there was testimony from consultants and staff confirming that those studies had been altered or modified, and that the original findings had not been fully disclosed to the public. So there were a number of really pretty stunning procedural deficiencies or omissions, and frankly, in my view, some commissions that form the allegations that the plaintiffs put forward. And again, we'll need to see which ones the judge actually adopts in support of the final decision.
Okay. Eileen Sarsfield. Unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I wanted to put the camera on too. I actually have two questions. The first one is, the case that you're referring to, I understand the judge is also looking at a similar case in Alexandria. Is that correct? And do you know anything about that?
That may be, and I don't know anything about it yet.
Okay.
Now I know to look for it.
The second question is a little bit different, and it's maybe off topic a bit, but one of our neighbors wanted to know about the spot zoning in Maryland, which is apparently not permissible by law. And would this have anything to do to be able to prevent what's going forward, the multifamily upzoning?
Spot zoning is generally, sure, that's a very good question. Spot zoning is generally a concept where there's a rezoning of a piece of property, a single piece of property, that is out of character with the zoning around it. So if this were to take a piece of property in the middle of an R90 zone and rezone it to industrial or, high density office or commercial, that could be eligible for a spot zoning challenge. In this case, we have the reverse. I mean, the county's essentially looking at rezoning on an extraordinarily broad scale, single family zones. So, off the cuff, my impression would be, or my response would be, I don't think that this would be eligible for a spot zoning type of challenge.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will say,
Yeah.
oh, sorry, Jerry.
I was going to say, yeah, to be continued.
Oh, okay. Yes, thank you very much for coming again and giving us your time. And we will now move on to the next item on our agenda. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
So now we're going to move on to a draft resolution on housing. The resolution was sent to delegates and members earlier today. I want to say first that the drafting process was difficult, probably more difficult than what it might appear on paper. Involved at least a half a dozen drafts by the housing co-chairs, circulated to the executive committee members, and many, many rounds of edits. I apologize that it was only sent to you all this morning, but we will provide time for questions and comments, and we'll likely need to plan a special meeting for amendments and votes on amendments and a final product. Stay tuned for that announcement after I talk to the executive committee about it. We will have some discussion time tonight, and we encourage delegates to send us suggestions also by email. Several of you have already emailed some comments about the resolution. I appreciate that. Anyone is free to email. You can email Liz Joyce or Ken Markison. They are the co-chairs of the Housing Committee. So let's take a look at the resolution. Alan, can you bring it up on screen? As we look through this, if you have any questions or comments, please jot them down and hold it until the end. I think that would help, or jot it down for yourself to email us about. But Liz is going to present the resolution. Go ahead, Liz. Liz, I think you might be muted.
It's a little difficult to figure out how to do this. We know that you all can read very, very well, but since you haven't seen it before, I think we need to go through it. Before I do that, I do want to point out the amount of work, the number of years of deliberations and study that have provided the context for this resolution, which is pretty consistent with previous resolutions that we have put out over the last few years over various housing issues. And what we've been trying to do is to zoom out from the way the whole set of issues has been presented. It's been presented as a binary choice, pretty much. Either we have these problems, which we acknowledge in the first paragraph, but there's only one way to solve them according to the proposal that we are examining now. And many, many studies, many investigations, many hours of research have raised questions about that. So that's what we're trying to do. We totally agree with the goals of the Attainable Housing Strategies, and that's what the first paragraph is about. It says, whom we represent, groups throughout the county. We acknowledge the projected future growth in Montgomery County populations. We welcome new residents, we embrace diversity, and we support providing equitable housing opportunities, both ownership and rental, to current and future generations of residents. Montgomery County Civic Federation wishes to partner with the county to achieve these goals. So what we're talking about in this resolution is what the issues, the underlying issues seem to be that need to be resolved in order to come up with a viable solution for these problems that we all acknowledge exist. So moving right along, the next paragraph, the Council of Governments projects that about 75% of new housing units will need to be income restricted, affordable housing. There are significant questions, however, about the reliability of the data on housing needs, the targets for new housing and the populations to be served, as well as how much housing has been built in recent years. And one of the problems is that that even the Council of Government numbers, which are used as a foundation for this discussion, were in dispute at the time that they were issued. And the council agreed to increase the number of units that we are committed to producing. But the big problem here is that 75% of the anticipated new residents are expected to make less than $50,000 a year. So the vast majority of housing needs are for this population. And there are also significant questions about how much housing has been approved, how much is in the pipeline, how much is available. And some of the community groups have come out today with a figure that's about a third or a quarter of what the county has been using for all these years. So these discrepancies and questions about the data must be resolved before the solutions can be found. In other words, you can't solve a problem unless you clearly define it and you have the numbers and studies to back up the solution that you propose. Okay, so the next paragraph. Montgomery County Planning Board has approved and submitted this Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative to address the county's current and anticipated housing needs. But as currently drafted, it would not produce affordable housing, but rather only market rate housing. And that is clear from the document. The Planning Board makes no pretense that this plan is about affordable housing. It is about market rate housing. The housing need, however, is concentrated among county residents of low to moderate income who can't afford market rate housing. This group includes young families, first-time home buyers, county employees, teachers, police, firefighters, and other valued county employees. So the Federation has determined that this plan, AHSI, is not well conceived and it is not directed toward the right targets, and it may result in unintended harm to many of the residential areas of the county. So we propose to adopt the following resolutions. Whereas the AHSI is designed to produce market rate housing, which will not be affordable to those of low to moderate income, where the need is greatest, and which in many areas will be more expensive to buyers than existing properties available in the market. There are many incidents in the county where one house that's worth, let's say, $750,000 is divided into, there will be a number of units produced, and they will be much more expensive than the original house, even though the argument is that they're smaller and they will therefore be less expensive. So in other words, the point is that remains to be seen. Okay, whereas AHSI is a sweeping proposal to upzone approximately 82% of Montgomery County's residential land for greater density. And that is a really important figure that has come out in the last couple of weeks. The county executive has mentioned this. And it affects substantially all county land within the Beltway and much outside. But the plan is based on a lack of data or analysis supporting the need for rezoning or evidencing that the zoning changes would achieve their stated purposes. And the stated purposes, as I keep saying, we do not disagree with, but we want to see a plan that will stand a chance of meeting these purposes. Okay, whereas many Montgomery County residents remain unaware of this proposal or the potential impact of the proposal on their own homes and neighborhoods. If you talk to people, you'll find out most residents don't know anything about it, even though the council keeps saying, oh, we've been working on this for 3 or 4 years. Yes, very quietly. Okay, whereas the Montgomery County's growth and infrastructure policy has not been sufficiently effective at identifying school and other growth-related infrastructure needs, and because a growing number of county exemptions and state budget deficits have put the financing of infrastructure associated with growth at continuing risk. In other words, when you increase the number of people, you increase the number of buildings, you increase the environmental impact, you can reduce the number, you can and probably will reduce the number of trees, you overtax the school system, fire safety, sewage, and so on. And there's no evidence from this plan that these issues will be dealt with. And that's come up at a lot of the listening sessions. Whereas the planning board has proposed implementing AHSI as a countywide zoning text amendment outside the master plan process, minimizing resident participation and the opportunity to be heard. A zoning text amendment is a very narrow way, even though many sweeping changes into zoning have been made by the county council. And one reason for that is that they can't be vetoed by the executive. Whereas the county executive has stated publicly that there is sufficient vacant land with residential zoning and a pipeline of residential real estate approvals capable of meeting all the projected housing needs without upzoning. In other words, we already have the capacity according to the county executive's analysis. So now, therefore, be it resolved that the Montgomery County Civic Federation calls on the county council to suspend consideration of this plan and the recommendations in their current form. In other words, despite the number of years that have been spent on this and the number of dollars, the data aren't there to show that this is the way to solve the problem. Be it further resolved that MCCF calls upon the county council to instruct the planning board to provide independent third-party data and analyses quantifying, and this is a big long-winded paragraph, but it's very important, the extent, if any, of a shortage of housing in the county at market prices. How much land in the county is available for residential development under current zoning, if there is a shortage of housing at market price points, why that shortage cannot be met by residential construction on land now zoned for it, and if the land available for new housing as a market rate is not sufficient, a quantitative analysis documenting what makes this plan the best way to approach that shortage, such as analysis to include comprehensive literature review and analysis of existing studies of the effectiveness of U.S. upzoning programs similar to AHSI. You'll often hear the council say, oh, other jurisdictions have done this, but they don't talk about what happened when they did. Okay, be it further resolved that MCCF called upon the county council when moving forward on this plan and any other significant proposal to review a racial equity and social justice analysis and state publicly any area of disagreement with the analysis and its reasons for disagreement. Now all ZTAs have to be subject to a racial equity analysis, as I understand it, but there's no requirement that the council pay any attention to this analysis. So that's an issue that needs to be brought out. They need to address whatever the study is, and if they disagree with it, say why and how and what they plan to do with any of the issues that are brought up. Be it further resolved, the council should instruct the planning board that where rezoning is proposed, planning shall develop and deliver analyses and propose tools to limit negative consequences, including the loss of mature tree canopy, increases in impermeable surfaces, stormwater runoff waivers and or relaxation of stormwater management rules, increases in traffic congestion, loss of naturally occurring affordable housing, and potential increases in investor-owned housing. And this is a big issue here because this is happening more and more. Be it resolved that the MCCF calls upon the county council to instruct the planning board to produce fiscal impact analyses of every proposal, including the cost of infrastructure, school construction, streetscaping, parking, road construction and maintenance, sidewalks, stormwater drainage, and other costs resulting from the proposed zoning revisions, as well as how the cost should be financed. And this is very important because the plan insists that the impact on the infrastructure of the county will be minimal. And there's no evidence that it will be that or otherwise, because no studies have been done. There's no extensive studies. Be it further resolved that MCCF called upon the county council to instruct the planning board to follow the master plan processes for all zoning changes of the type presented in AHSI, and to maximize community review and feedback by ensuring every affected homeowner in Montgomery County is notified in writing at least 120 days before a public hearing on any proposal to change zoning of their properties, the specificities of the proposed rezoning, and the specifics of any additional rezonings along the Thrive Montgomery 2050 designated growth corridors. And the specifications and standards are different from these growth corridors and their so-called buffer zones. Okay, this is another long one too. We call on the county council to instruct the planning board and other appropriate departments working together to refocus efforts on a comprehensive plan to address the county's unmet housing needs, populations needing assistance, and I want to put a semicolon here. What's important about this is that throughout this entire process, the planning board and the council have worked independently of the other executive agencies. So all the wealth of information that is available from these agencies has not been required to be part of the process. So let's see, a study with conclusions on the market and why the large number of approved units in the pipeline are not moving forward, and to consider a comprehensive range of approaches to increase the supply of housing to low and moderate income residents. By way of example, such approaches may include recommendations on, but need not be limited to, the future use of vacant available land, expanding and improving naturally occurring affordable housing, which has been disappearing, providing home ownership opportunities, reducing maximum floor to area ratios for single family housing, targeting upzonings on known redevelopment sites such as White Flint, and converting underutilized commercial buildings for residential use, with data to show how recommended approaches will address the county's needs and suggested actions to limit unintended negative consequences. So therefore, be it further resolved that any future residential zoning changes should be implemented through the master plan process after meaningful engagement and consultation with residents, including the appointment of advisory commissions and represented affected neighborhoods. Throughout this process, the planning board has listed the various forms of engagement that they have used, but from my public relations work, most of this engagement, quote unquote, has been one-sided, or even if there has been a forum for discussion, usually the most we can get is that the council might listen to the residents' concerns, but there's very little feedback about what they will do with the residents' concerns. And that's one question we have coming out of these listening sessions. What changes are going to happen? And as someone asked at many of these meetings, okay, we know we've got all these problems, or we know we've got a shortage, but we need to know the nature of the shortage, and we need to know exactly what other alternatives you considered before settling on this plan. And I never heard an answer to that. So these issues make up the context from which this resolution comes, and it represents, as I said, a great deal of work we have as a group, as an umbrella organization. We represent many different viewpoints, but this is what the Federation has seen happening and is concerned about and is proposing for this resolution. And sorry about the machine gun delivery, but it's really difficult to do this.
Ms. Cheryl, are you there?
I'm sorry, I am here. The other co-chair of the Housing Committee, Ken Markison, is just going to make a very short comments before we start going to questions and comments from delegates. Ken, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Cheryl. Liz covered it well. One point I'd like to emphasize, though, is that and I think she said it particularly well, that this is presented up till now as a binary choice. You're either in favor of the initiative or you're opposed to the initiative. I would submit that either way, you're not going to address the housing needs. And what we did here, or attempted to do here, was offer an alternative that is actually capable of doing that. And the way it does it is by gathering the data needed to determine how much housing is needed, and then suggest to the government, to the council, that they look at that data and look as well at the resources currently available to build affordable housing, workforce housing, and housing to meet other needs, along with that data of what will be required, and then come up with plans that actually perform that service. So what we're really saying is not no affordable housing, no new zoning. We're saying, let's do it right. And the resolution is pointed in that direction and asks for the findings, asks for the creative solutions, looking at the resources that this county has, and let's get the job done. That's really the thinking, but we're certainly interested in comments from the group on details. We think we certainly can't think of everything, and we look forward to your comments.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Chris Reynolds, you're first. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thanks. I've got a lot of comments. I'll send them in. We don't need to belabor them all tonight, but I just wanted to say a couple of things that I think are useful to bear in mind. First of all, this group put together a housing white paper, not the full body group, but a committee last year put together a housing white paper about kind of our vision for Montgomery County Civic Federation and what we'd like to see happen on housing issues in the future. And I was surprised that group of folks who put that white paper together weren't consulted on this document. My understanding is this was put together by Cheryl and Liz and Joyce and Ken, and that happens to leave off the other members of that committee, Tony and Genevieve and myself, who generally offer a different perspective. So I think it's a little bit sad and embarrassing for the group that the fullness of perspective within the Civic Federation is not reflected in this document. I generally expect this group to do better than that, and so that's too bad. And I think one of the things that we would have pointed out had we been there is that a lot of this document is based on a misunderstanding of the Council of Governments reports. Right there in paragraph 2, it talks about how 75% of new housing units will need to be income restricted affordable housing. That's not true. That's not in the report. I got the report right here. If I can share my screen, I'll just show you the relevant passage here. It's on page 15 of the report, or 16, sorry, of the report. I'm sending a request. Maybe you can approve it just so I can show this one page here. Thank you. Here's a report from the Council of Governments. Relevant passages here. The framework recommends that about 38%, not 75%, of new units are priced in the lowest cost bands, housing costs of around $0 to $1,300 per month. 40%, which is the largest percent, by the way, priced in the middle cost bands, $1,300 to $2,500 per month. And by the way, not for nothing, this middle price band, which is the largest amount, my standalone house falls in this group. Most of the new construction in downtown Silver Spring at market rate falls in this price band. My sister-in-law just got a nice new apartment in downtown Silver Spring. It falls in this middle 40% price band. And that's further explained down here below with this figure 7. Again, our document is quoting 75%, but that 75% is up to $2,500 a month. So it's quite significant. A, it's not income restricted affordable housing. And B, this doesn't say that people with low and moderate incomes can't afford market rate housing. It just says there's not enough market rate housing. So I think, again, I don't want to belabor the point, and I don't want to, tell everybody they did a bad job, but I think you want to think harder about that second paragraph particularly, and then again, where those points come up farther down in the document. And I'm happy to help the group sort of solve that problem and figure it out and work from there. So I just wanted to say that up front. The other thing I wanted to call out is just a little bit odd and maybe worthy of a further explanation is the now therefore be it resolved bit, second page, third paragraph down, calls on the Montgomery County Council to suspend consideration of AHSI and the recommendations in their current form. In my understanding, perhaps I'm misinformed on this point, is that there are no ZTAs currently in front of the council. There are no binding requirements that this study places on the council. So I don't think it's entirely clear what it means to suspend consideration. Does that mean just don't think about affordable or attainable housing anymore? And it's not entirely.
No.
Yeah, so I think we just want to be careful with what we're asking for. Again, I'll send full comments. I'm happy to participate in any kind of a further committee work to polish this. I think it needs additional polish, and I'll leave it there. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let me see. I think Carrie Lamari was next. Carrie.
Thank you. 2 points. The first deals with the affordable housing paragraph, and I don't have it in front of me. Liz, you pointed out that, or you said that there are no affordable housings in the Attainable Housing Initiative. That's actually wrong. The staff said that they were looking at community land trusts, and they were looking at potentially increasing the MPDU's requirement. I would say it would be insufficient. And I'm hoping you change that word, that the proposal will not address the needed 75% that is one of the categories or one of the conditions that the Council of Governments did apply to their recommendation. And the second thing I would like to point out is equal application of the law. The fact of the matter is, Friedson himself has a red line, and that is that there shall be no expansion, or this Attainable Housing Initiative will not be implemented, north of the Beltway. It won't be implemented in Potomac. It won't be implemented in Brookville, and it won't be in Brookville, Maryland. It won't be implemented in parts of Laytonsville. Also, where there are R200 zones and R60 zones. Equal application of the law is the 14th Amendment, and legally, any changes of zones within any category, whether it's the R200 zone, the R60 zone, the R90 zone, it has to be equally applied in the county. You can't target an area unless it's a special protection area or a special protection consideration like affordable housing, or to protect some environmental feature or something like that. So those are the two main things that I'd like you to potentially think about changing. One is the affordable housing. It's not sufficient. And the second is equal application of the law, equal application of the zone. I mean, Mr. Friedson himself said he's not interested in really supporting it if you're going to go south of the Beltway on River Road. Well, to me, it's just unfair. It's unfair to the people that live in Silver Spring, Wheaton, Glenmont, Aspen Hill, parts of Rockville, etc. If you're going to apply it across the zone. And also the third thing, if there was a third thing, if you could emphasize a little more on the concerns of traffic congestion, stormwater management. There was an action list, action report that was submitted with the Thrive Montgomery 2050. And they said that many of those issues will not be addressed for 7 to 10 years. Now, if we get the density before they look at the infrastructure, before they look at the services, before they look at the needs of the county, you're creating a problem, and then you're searching for a solution afterwards. I've been doing this for 40 some years, and we've always been chasing our tail when it comes to infrastructure. We're building, and then we're looking at the infrastructure, and we're not getting it. So those are the three things I'd like to see more emphasized.
The two affordable measures, the increasing MPDUs and the community land trusts, are they in the current proposal that went to the council?
Well, they were in the presentation that was given by Gwen and Mr. Santori. And I mentioned that I like the idea of them looking into community land trusts. But the fact of the matter is, they're not going to get the 75% even with those two. In my opinion.
I'm just saying that the resolution is only going to talk about what's in the proposal that was sent to the council.
Well, I haven't looked at that, so I can't tell you if they've included that, to be quite honest with you.
Pretty sure those two things are not in the proposal. Okay.
They are not.
Paula was next. Go ahead, Paula.
Sure. First, I want to say thanks a lot I don't think I received this morning. I took my email, but thank you for reading through it. And it's a tremendous amount of work, and I really appreciate and realize how much work it is. One thing I wanted to say, a couple of things first. In the clauses where you're requesting, like, whereas, do this, blah, 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 and you're saying, do this study, do the traffic study, do the data analysis. We really need to have not just them to do yet another analysis, but make it very clear that they have to have mitigation measures. The mitigation has to happen, and there have to be annual reports. A little bit of my background, I'm retired now, but I did NEPA analyses for many, many years, and we always required the mitigation. And I'll give you one example. The new high school on Woodward Avenue, the traffic studies showed that the intersection of Tuckerman and Old Georgetown was going to fail. So I looked into it and called the agencies and said, what is the mitigation that you're going to do? And the answer was, we're not doing any mitigation. And years earlier than that, I was on the White Flint Advisory Commission, and that was hours and hours of volunteer hours. And I don't even know how to put it, except it was just ridiculous. It was nothing. It was just all on the part of our, it was just bullshit. I'm sorry, but I apologize. So I think that the Civic Fed has the responsibility to really put in there, we are requiring that you have mitigation measures and that you follow through on the mitigation measures, and that you are transparent and make public every year, annually, a report on how your mitigation measures are solving the issues that are coming up. Thank you, and thank you again. I know this is just a tremendous amount of work. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Jerry Garson, you're next. Jerry.
Yes. In the last 18 years, we have seen that the State Department of Assessment and Taxation has shown in my neighborhood that land values have actually decreased by 9.77%, while the homes, or the building portion, has increased by 155.83%. This has caused many of these people to think that land has gotten cheaper. They're just, the way SDAT, or State Department of Assessments and Taxation, is showing values of land. Land did not go down in the last 18 years, but that's why they think there's affordable land available. And we really need some really good explanations of what the data really shows, not just, oh, we think this is what's happened. I think this was an excellent report. It might need some minor modifications, but I think we're really on the right track.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Jerry. I'm trying to think. I thought I saw another hand. Liz Joyce. Liz Joyce, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, you see, I'm such a rule follower. I muted myself. I'm sorry about the impression that members of the white paper committee needed to have been part of this particular committee, this bylaws committee, what we're discussing tonight, not bylaws, this resolution. This has been a compendium of work for many, many years, and the committee voted the white paper out of the committee, and then the body as a whole approved it. So we considered that the foundation for what we've been doing. I also want to focus, we can discuss until the cows come home, what groups of income people can afford market rate housing, but market rate housing is going up and up and up. And one of the reasons, there was a fascinating article in Politico a few days ago that showed that in this country, massive amounts of housing, single-family housing, has been bought up by foreign investors, and that is nothing to do with demand except by foreign investors. And our country does not have the rules that other countries have. That is one astonishingly important factor that has not been dealt with. Another important issue is the term attainable. The planning board came up with that term, which is pretty much meaningless. Basically, attainable means affordable by anyone who can afford it. There was an industry standard of attainability, which is people with incomes between 80 and 120% of average median income. But the county planning board decided to ditch that term because when they did the Silver Spring Missing Middle study in 2020 or 2021, they found out that even in Silver Spring, which is more modestly priced than other areas, most of the missing middle housing would definitely not be affordable by any industry standards of affordability. So, and one of the problems that we've had in dealing with these presentations from the county, and the planning board director, is that he'll use numbers from one year for a set of figures for inflation, and then go to another year for another comparison. And you have to be a statistician to know what they're doing. We've had a lot of people doing a lot of investigation about all this stuff, but if they're using inaccurate numbers, that's a problem. And in one of the meetings, someone confronted the planning board chair, the director rather, with the inaccuracy of his numbers. He didn't deny it. He said, that's the latest numbers I have. Well, as a taxpayer paying for this $25 million a year agency that's supposed to be professional planners, that's not an acceptable answer. If you don't have the facts, go back and get them. And what's the matter? You've spent how many years on this? So we have a very valid reason for questioning their numbers. And we can go back and we can finesse the language, but the problem is there's a big chasm between reality and what they're telling us. And the term attainable means nothing. And the reason they came up with it is that they knew they weren't going to be able to present a plan that created enough affordable housing for which there is the greatest need. Whether it's 55 or 75, it's the greatest need. And meanwhile, naturally occurring affordable housing is being knocked down and replaced by expensive housing. These are the problems that we have here. And it is not to say that we don't respect any effort to address it, but if the effort to address it is not going to meet the goals, what kind of a business would still be in business if they had a strategic plan like this? So this is what we're saying. We can go back, and as you know, the planning board admits that this plan is about market rate housing, which is very expensive and getting more so. And it's a tragedy that a lack of the federal, state, and local policy allowed this situation to develop. The situation now is who's going to pay to fix it? On whom is the burden most heavily placed? And is this, even if it were to be enacted, is it going to solve the problem? And those are the questions that we're asking. And we'll go back and get absolutely accurate data. I totally agree. We must not be out there with anything that's inaccurate. And I completely appreciate any attempt to correct any inaccuracies. But the problem is there's a big fact reality chasm here. And we, as the residents, have not been able to make a dent in the way that the planning board is approaching it. And we're getting, they keep saying there's no legislation. They've been working on this for 5 years. I imagine the legislation is in draft at the very least. So they're saying, oh, it's not a done deal. Well, okay, fine. If it's not a done deal, how about a pause? How about suspending what you're doing and go back to the drawing board and answer some of these questions, which are very responsible questions from a group of highly thoughtful people and taxpayers.
All right, Liz, we're going to try to give some other people a chance here. Harriet Quinn wanted to be called on. Harriet, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Liz, and all the committee members. This is very comprehensive, and I appreciate all the work you've been doing. It's been really great. I had one minor suggested change, maybe, which is in some of the wording. I think I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize, but it says something about having adequate vacant land or something to that effect. But I wanted to clarify that some of the existing zoning capacity, which last report from the planning department in 2020 was another 82,000 units of zoning capacity plus the pipeline, which is over 30,000 units. A lot of that would be, under rezoning existing property, existing buildings. So I just wanted to clarify that not all of that additional capacity is vacant land, and might need to tweak that language a little bit. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm just looking through the comments. Yes, John Holden in the comments makes the point that the 19-unit apartment buildings are just under the limit, so you don't have to have an MPDU. And that is something that a lot of neighborhoods have noticed, and I appreciate that point. There's several comments about the numbers. Some of you who have said you didn't get the proposal this morning, I've seen you in our database, so I don't know why you didn't get it. You could check your junk folder. But we will try to determine why you didn't receive it this morning. I apologize for that. And are there any other hands up? Leanne Tobias. Sorry. Go ahead, Leanne. You're muted.
Okay, I never remembered to unmute, and I apologize. I wanted to say I thought that that I think it was Chris's comment possibly, but whoever's on making sure that the resolution quotes the COG report accurately and is otherwise accurate. I think that's very well placed. Other than that, I would want to agree with the comments that this is generally a very well-crafted resolution, and I would say that needs a little polishing, needs a buff up, but I think that it's generally very well done. And given that it's hard to put these resolutions together. I just wanted to say the committee's done a good job.
Thank you. Are there any other suggestions, changes, questions, observations you'd like to make? We are taking notes, and we're going to watch this again.
Yeah, one more. Joel Teitelbaum had a very good observation in the
Okay.
chat.
All right.
Yes, on just demographic data to be done by professional demographers, and might want to put that into the paragraph on the type of study that we think would be appropriate.
Okay. Jill Teitelbaum, do you want to get on and, because I see you have a lot of comments here, do you want to get on and make your comments?
This is Joel. I'm not a member of the MCCF, so I'm just here as a guest, and I just thought I'd send that out in the chat, and I'd be glad to help Liz and the committee on the demographics, because that's what I studied in graduate school. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joel. We will look at your comments more carefully after this. Anyone else want to speak tonight? Let me see. Leanne, your hand is still up. Did you want to speak again?
No. Yeah, I need to put it down.
Okay,
So.
Amy Waychoff, would you like to speak? Amy?
Sure. I just, I might have missed it, but I just wasn't sure how strong. I mean, I really like the resolution, by the way. I wasn't sure how strong the part about the lack of citizen input was in the resolution. I put in the chat how I read in the big long report that there was something called HEAT, and I remember looking at the types of groups that were part of that, and it did not look like it was a good representation of people who might live in normal neighborhoods. So I was just wondering if that can be strengthened at all, or maybe I missed it in the resolution.
Sure, I'll make a note of that. We'll take a look at it. All right, so I don't see any other hands. Like I said earlier, I will take up with the executive committee. Okay, so Barbara Hoover, do you want to just speak out loud, Barbara Hoover? Barbara? Okay. All right. I'm sorry. So as I said, I'm going to take up with the executive committee whether we need a special meeting to take amendments to this and vote on a resolution. We should try to have a resolution relatively soon. I don't think we've discussed in the executive committee how soon it needs to be. And so I will take that up with the executive committee, and we will also take a look at all of these comments and rewatch the video tonight and see what we can do about incorporating comments. Yeah. Sharon Canavan notes that those growth corridors present some very large construction that comes up right against single family homes. We are aware of that. In my own neighborhood, there's an entire block of single family homes on the interior that's upzoned for medium density housing. And I agree. I think that's a big problem in this proposal. Okay, looks like.
Sorry, Cheryl, can I speak to that? This is Harriet again.
Sure.
I live in the University Boulevard corridor, which is the first master plan to be taken up after Thrive. And
yes.
they are proposing rezoning 300 to 400 single family properties to commercial residential neighborhood zone. And they just announced it yesterday, or Friday. So we're all kind of looking at that.
Okay. All right, Carrie, you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you. I was on the Heat Group representing the Civic Federation. I want to make it clear. The Heat Group was not intended to represent citizens' concerns. Every time unintended consequences were brought up by me. I was shot down. What I was consistently told at every meeting was that the heat group was put together to find ways to make attainable housing happen. They wanted attributes, and they said it. They wanted attributes that would encourage developers and property owners to build the attainable housing. They weren't interested in dealing with consequences that would come about as a result of building the attainable housing. So it wasn't designed. There wasn't any community output in that group from the citizens. Or, they didn't want to hear it.
Okay, thank you. Paula, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, two things. One, if we do have suggested changes, do you want us to email them to you, Cheryl, or Liz? Or what's the process so you can capture?
Yeah, you can email them to Liz. You can copy me if you want to, just so nothing slips through the cracks. I think that would be helpful. Or you can, and also Ken Markison is a co-chair of the Housing Committee. So that's 3 different ways of getting your suggestions into the pile.
Okay, thanks. And I also just wanted to add the elephant in the room, which Carrie had indirectly talked about in his first comment, which is that if you look at where they're doing this and which neighborhoods are not going to be subjected to it, the council donors, most of their neighborhoods will not be part of this upzoning. They've been carefully excluded if you look at the maps. And I believe that's also true for, I think, about half of the county council members. And I know we're just, playing this straight and reading the documents, but that's an important part of politics in this county. Thank you.
You're welcome. We did have in the white paper some language about the entire county participating in, building more housing. That's maybe something that we can take out of the white paper and put into this proposal, if that's what you want.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So I think looks like we've run through all of the questions and comments. We look forward to seeing your emails. As I said, we're going to review everything. We will look at this video again and see what we can do before a meeting that would take amendments and adopt a resolution. The last thing I want to say is not on the subject of housing. Recently, the executive committee signed off on combining our June annual awards ceremony with a 100-year celebration of the Civic Federation. We've asked for volunteers before to work on that. We have none. If anyone here is good at party planning, event planning, and you're willing to lend a hand to that, we would appreciate getting some volunteers on that. Okay. Anything else? Any other announcements or new business before we sign off tonight? Alan, can you save the comments in the chat? Because there's some substantive stuff in here that people didn't speak out loud.
Of course.
Okay, that would be great. Thanks. Okay, well, that concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It was very constructive. I appreciate everyone's feedback. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.